Hey, Sylvie Dow here. So thank you so much for joining the Secrets from the Saddle All Things Cycling podcast. And before we get into this episode, which you are absolutely going to love, the amazing workshop that I have for you and the promo that's going with it. So I have my 4-hour cycling skills intensive workshop. And the way it flows like this, the first hour, we talk all about pedal stroke. And I break it down for you. I do a presentation, then I get on my bike and I present there, and then I make you get on your bike, and so that you can fully understand what I'm talking about. Like, pedal stroke is the fundamental foundation for cycling, and then we start applying all the skills like the hill climbing, the sprinting, the event, being more stronger and faster. So you have to lay your foundation before you can add all those extra skills. And that's what we do. The first hour, the next hour is about hill climbing. How do you take the pedal stroke form that you just applied with gear management and climb your hills more efficiently and effectively? Then the third one is strength and power. That's sprinting, more gear management. How do you effectively sprint and manage your gears? So important. It doesn't matter what level you're at, because you're going to be accelerating at some point. And then the third one is nutrition presentation. We're going to go over, I send out a questionnaire. I find out what your struggles are, and we talk about that as well. And also there's bonuses. You get a 1-hour bike maintenance recording. So that is basically a clinic, and it tells you and shares with you how you can change a tire, repair a broken chain, adjust your brakes. Very invaluable if you're riding outside, say by yourself, or you want to feel more comfortable, ride longer. The next one is my favorite, 9 hill drills that you can take and you can apply after you do this. And then I'm going to send you a 4-month cycling skills gym workout. So very specific to cycling, so you can start applying those even off the season or a little bit on the season. But here's the promo for you. Use the word pedal and you go to cyclingskillspro.com for the 4-hour cycling skills intensive, and you get all those bonuses with it. So I look forward to meeting you and sharing with you the skills and trips that I have been working on and coaching tons of my clients for the last 15 years. Thanks. I forgot one. Oh my God. Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to another amazing episode of Secrets from the Saddle podcast with all things cycling with this amazing, extraordinary lady, Susan Sly. I cannot even begin to express how grateful I am to have her here. Now, before we get into her introduction or having welcome her in, I'm going to go through a couple little things that you should know about this extraordinary lady. Are you guys ready? Okay, so Susan Sly is the founder of Agency 8, and I'm just going to tell you, that's where we know each other. We've known each other for about 5+ years, going back through this agency, through network marketing. And so she also has, this is an agency that's part of her Step Into Her Power company. She is also co-founder of an AI company, RadiusAI, which I'm an investor in. And she is done extremely well in the MLM area of making over $20 million in the last 17 years. And we are also teammates in that department. So I still have more. Okay, Susan has been on CNN, NBC, Fox, Lifetime TV, and CBN, and the morning show. She also has authored 7 books, so you have to look her up. And she also has an extremely successful podcast, so you have to look her up there as well. So this is, the reason why I bring Susan in here is that she has extraordinary athletic background, and which goes into, she's done the Boston Marathon 6 times, and even before that, she has a pro division card for Canada in Ironman triathlons. So welcome, Susan, to the podcast.
Well, thanks so much, Sylvie, for having me. And I just want to congratulate you. Really and truly, there are a lot of people out there who think about starting their own podcast and it remains a thought and it doesn't become an action. It's like a lot of people who think, oh, I'm cycling. I'm going to someday do a century ride, or I'm going to someday do an Ironman, and that someday never comes. And so I want to acknowledge you for just jumping in and saying, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. And you're doing it. So congrats.
Thanks a lot, Susan. And I love, as you, I'm sure, love networking and meeting people. This has been like, I've just getting started. I get goosebumps thinking about the kind of people that I've already met and that who I'm going to meet. But Susan isn't just here to talk about triathlon. She is going to give us a little bit of background, but she is a NLP and certified professional, but she's going to talk a lot about mindset and in sport and in business. And this is a really cool episode because I have not had anybody on yet, and I probably won't, that's going to give us the goods like Susan. So I'd love to just start about, how you got into cycling and triathlon so back, back in the day.
That's a great question. So I was a runner, and when I was in high school, I was a Team Canada athlete as a junior, and I, like a lot of kids, I really didn't take the pressure well. So at the peak of my high school training, I was doing about 20 kilometers, or if you're in the US, about 12 miles a day in training. And that, was every single day. I was supposed to take a rest day. I never took the rest day. And as a result, I became overtrained. And during high school, I moved from Ontario to Nova Scotia. I was a top 3 runner there. I started to get scouted by universities, and I combusted. And I went to the extreme. I gained 70 pounds. I stopped competing. And then at one point, as I was finishing university, I looked in the mirror and I didn't even recognize the person staring back at me. And as a result of that, what I decided to do first was go back into running. And then a friend of mine said, hey, you should try duathlon. And so I went and did a duathlon. It was part of the President's Choice Series back in the day when they had that. And I'm busting out the run, and then I get on the bike and I don't even know how to shift gears at all, Sylvie. And so I go from having this great run to I'm struggling up this hill. I'll never forget this. And it was, oh gosh, I can't even remember where it was, like somewhere in Niagara Lakes region in Ontario.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm going up the escarpment and I'm in the heaviest gear, and this guy bikes by me like nothing. And he's probably like 75 years old. And he goes, you're in the wrong gear. And I was like, oh, so I get off the bike and I start walking the bike up. And I made a resolution with myself, 2 things in that race. The first one was I saw the girls on the pro rack, so where all the girls were that had their elite cards for duathlon and triathlon. I said, next year this time I'm going to be on that rack. Number 2, I said, I'm hiring a cycling coach. And I did. So that's how I got into cycling. And the first lessons were, these are how you shift the gears. And I think
very smart move.
Thank you. To anyone listening, I think the thing I would say, it's not just about cycling, it's about anything. In the face of challenge, we can give up or we can get better. And what is your life going to be like if you decide to give up, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, looking back? And thank God I didn't. So a year later, I was on that pro rack. And I went on to get my elite card for duathlon in Canada. And then if you have your pro card for duathlon, back in those days, you had to race pro triathlon. So my very first triathlon was the Canadian National Long Course Championships. And I busted that out, finished top 10, and that was it.
How'd the swim look?
It was freezing cold. It was in northern Alberta. And back in those days, Mark Bates was like one of the top triathletes in all of Canada. And so I'm freezing cold. We're at the side of the lake and there's little ice crystals around it. And I turned to Mark Bates and I'm like, this is my first triathlon ever. He's like, your first triathlon ever is the Canadian Long Course Championships? I'm like, yeah. And he said, come here. And he starts rubbing Vaseline on my forehead. And anyway, it was a crazy weather day. And if you don't know how long that is, it's a 2K swim and 90K bike, and then a full half marathon, 21K. During the course of that, we got hail, we got rain, we got a bit of snow. And then when I finished, it was about 30 degrees Celsius. So it was crazy.
Oh my gosh, you got all the temperatures in there. It's like, how did you do on the swim though? Because I don't think you're a swimmer. You're a runner and a cyclist.
No. By this time I had done my share of century rides. I had, had my coaching certification. So I was racing, I was coaching, but I had a swim coach as well. And I would do master swimming. I would do the same master swimming training at the same time with Simon Whitfield, who was one of Canada's best Olympic distance triathletes. And so my swim was horrible. I always couldn't wait to get out of the water and get on the bike, because I became a ferocious biker. I went from the girl that didn't even know how to shift the gears to becoming a beast on the bike. I could be coming out of the water. One race in Montreal, it was a half Ironman in 2000. And I was in really bad pain. I had a bike accident and my back was just like wretched. I was in so much pain, and I was swimming and I was going crooked. No matter what I tried to do, I couldn't go straight. I get out of the water, and I was sponsored by this bike company, this custom bike company called Porter, a Canadian company. I get out of the water, Sylvie, and my bike was bright yellow. I used to call it Porter Pete. On the women's elite rack, there was one bike left. It was poor Porter Pete. So I get out of the swim. I'm in dead last. And in my mind, I was like, girls, I feel sorry for you, because here I come. And we were racing around, I can't remember what it's called in Montreal, but it's like the Formula One track.
Yeah, it's still there.
20 laps of this thing. And I just started peeling off the girls. And then I finished the bike. I was in 10th place on the run. And I just kept passing them. And I was in so much pain. And we're like probably about, I want to say maybe less than a kilometer to the finish. And everyone's like, go that way, because there was a course marker. So the fans told the French girl the right way to go, told me the wrong way to go. I ended up finishing second. I crossed the line, pass out. My coach is there. My agent is there. And I was like, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Well, later on, I found out that my rib was sticking out of my back.
What?
Yeah. So I did the whole race with one of my ribs subluxed, poking out of my back.
How did that happen?
I don't know. Just training.
It's a swim. Definitely.
Just training.
That whole experience minus the rib sound like my first triathlon experience, because I was not so you're from Brockville. That was my first triathlon. They take you out in the boat, they drop you in the St. Lawrence, and you have to swim in, and the current's going like this. So everybody's like going further away from the start line. I was like, oh my gosh. I get out like second last, luckily. And, but like you, just a beast on the bike, and I held my own on the road. But there was that old guy that passed me, and I was just like, and I'm like, okay, you can have it. That's it. But nobody else is getting past me.
It was probably the same guy. It's the same guy.
Yeah, maybe. It sounds like, because it was 2000 when I did mine. I was just like, okay, you got that's good. You're awesome. And I'm like, that's it. Nobody else is passing me. But oh my gosh, was that horrible. I'm like, triathlon's not for me. After that experience, I'm like, I got to do something more extreme. But oh my gosh. So you excelled there, and then I think you went to Malaysia. You did your pro, like you did your Ironman triathlon in Malaysia, and I think that was the last one in your races, and then you moved on.
Well, what happened was I really had this dream that I wanted to win Kona. And so I did, I think I did something like 16 half Ironmans. I'm not a short course racer, because I don't love racing in the peloton. That's the first thing. And I need to make up for the swim. And in Olympic distance triathlon, the swim is almost the same as half Ironman swim. So I figure the more time I had on the bike, the longer the run, the more I could kick some butt, right? So I was going along, but I wasn't feeling good. And there were a lot of things that were going on. I owned a business. I was on radio. I was on television. I was training clients. There were a lot of things happening. And so what happened was, to make a long story short, I had gone to my doctor and I had said to him, listen, you know, you come to me when you want to know what shoes you want to wear for working out or what you need to eat. And I handed him a Post-it note and I said, I want these tests. Something's wrong. And so January 13th of 2000, he called me in his office and he showed me a film essentially, and it looked like a fishbowl full of fish. And he said, Susan, and he was a bit teary because he had delivered my daughter. We were friends. And he said, his name was Ross. And Ross said, Susan, you have multiple sclerosis and we haven't seen a case like this. It's so bad that you'll be in a wheelchair in 10 years and dead in 20. And I was in shock. But my first thought was, crap, I haven't done the Boston Marathon yet. And my second one was, I haven't done the Ironman yet. What about Kona? And so I'm really symptomatic. I'm slurring my speech. I'm dropping things. I'm having a really hard time on the bike. I'm getting a lot of vertigo, and training is just really bad. I went and I was doing, I was a top 5 North American duathlete. I've raced in Europe as well. And so I was doing a series in the US, the Dannon Duathlon series. And it was hardcore. Like, one of the women I raced against, since, you know, we're talking about cycling, was Kimberly Bruckner. Kimberly Bruckner was an Olympic cyclist. So, like, fortunately she wasn't a runner. So I, you know, go bust out that first 5K run in something like 17 minutes and change. And then we'd be biking and Kim would be, you know, just killing it. And I was averaging, like, for 30K, I was averaging in and around, you know, 40 kph, right? Like, we're just no drafting whatsoever. And then my second run would be like 18, 19 minutes. But we were doing these races all over the southeastern US, like New Orleans and Durham, North Carolina. And I passed out in one race. And then I went to do a race in Muskoka. I had to be pulled out of the water. I couldn't breathe. And I said, that's it, my career's over. But I hadn't told my agent, Ronnie, or my coach that I was sick. And so I kept training as much as I could. And then I said, I'm going to go and do Ironman Florida. And because being a pro, I had sponsors. I was sponsored by Oakley. I was sponsored by DeSoto. I had the bike company. I had money sponsors. And so I'm really a stubborn person. So when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And so I was training for Florida, and that injury acted up again. And I found myself, they used to let you, if you're from Toronto, you know what I'm talking about. They used to let you bike around Mount Pleasant Cemetery. And I'm biking around doing my intervals, and I was in so much pain. I get off the bike. I had to call Chris, come help me. I couldn't even walk. And I felt like there was this burning down the whole part of my body. And it was not only the sublux rib, I was having an MS flare up. So instead of saying my pro career is over, I called my agent and I said, Ronnie, I can't go to Florida. What's the next one I can do? He calls me back the next day. He goes, I got you into Ironman Malaysia. There's going to be a lot of press there. The #1 woman in the world, Natasha Badman's going to be racing, and it's in January. So I trained, I recovered, and then I'm riding my bike on my trainer. I have about 13 days before I'm supposed to race. So the race was January 28th, 2001, and it's January 15th. It's almost a year to the day I've been diagnosed with MS. I'm doing a 5-hour training ride in my apartment in Toronto. At 4 minutes and 45 seconds, a bolt came loose in my trainer. I went smashing forward into the television. My feet were cleated in. My pelvis smashed across the top tube, and I totally blacked out. And Chris says to me, he's like, you know, I wake up, he's standing over me. He said, I have to take you to the hospital. I said, no, you don't. I said, because they'll tell me I can't race. And so there was a company in Canada that had just started, an electrolyte company, Eload. And I was actually the director of sales for Eload with Dr. Douglas Stoddard. And so I called Doug the next day. I said, Doug, I think I've smashed my pelvis. I need to do something. I'm still going to Malaysia. He's like, you're crazy. He made me this donut ring to put on my bike seat. And so I couldn't ride because I had a hematoma in my pelvis that was protruding. It was the size of a grapefruit. So I still flew to Malaysia. I flew from Toronto to Chicago to Seoul, South Korea to Kuala Lumpur. And then we're flying to Langkawi Island, and the press is on my plane, and they're like, who is this Susan Sly? You know, I've never heard of her. And someone goes, oh, she's a top 5 duathlete. This is her first big Ironman. And then he goes, oh yeah, Natasha Badman's here and this woman's here. And I'm like sitting right behind them going, I can't even sit on a bike and I'm still going. And that, you know, this show is about mindset, Sylvie. To have that mindset that somehow this is going to work out. I can't sit on my bike, but somehow I'm going to do a 4K swim, 190 kilometer bike, like 180 kilometer bike, and a 42 kilometer run. Somehow I'm still going to do that and race pro against the #1 woman in the world. And there was a whole series of events that happened. And I just had tremendous faith that I was going to be able to do this race. And I ended up doing the race and coming in top 10 in the pro division of the Ironman. And that was my last race. Yeah.
Yes. Chris takes you home and puts your head. It's like, wow. That's like, I've heard the last part about that race, but I had not heard all the details. And oh my gosh, that's extraordinary. So the thing is that let's just go right into mindset. Like we just left on that. And talking about, because a lot of us athletes or active individuals, you know, we set our expectations for the spring or maybe race goals. We're just going to pretend we have race goals. Forget about COVID. We all have some race goals whenever that finishes. But I know I do. I have race expectations or I'm training for a specific event. But what is kind of like the mindset that you would, like, how would you talk to somebody about mindset where you're talking, like talking about sports? And then we'll just move into the business side, because that's where you have a huge amount of experience, like, you know, over the last 20 years, you know, after that, you just launched yourself right into like all the amazing businesses that you have. So what kind of advice would you give? Let's talk with the athletes.
Sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of the people who are listening, we're athletes, but we're other things too. We're moms or dads, or we own businesses, or, you know, we are in management jobs or whatever it is. So going back to the first thing is, one, you have to very clearly visualize the outcome. That's the first thing in anything you do, whether it's racing, business, life, there is an outcome. And the question is, what outcome do you want? So with the Ironman, I visualized myself coming in the top 10, and I didn't know how that was going to happen. And that's the second thing. You really give that how up to your higher power. And so what happened for me was I went to the race registration in Malaysia, in Langkawi Island, and I register for the race, and I go, and, you know, if you've ever traveled with your bike, you know, you have this huge bike case, and I'm, you know, putting my bike together, and I went to try and get on it, and the pain was so bad. And I've given birth to children. It was worse than that. And I just sat on a curb and I started crying. And going back to, we visualize the outcome, we let go of the how. All right. So there's a guy, and he comes up to me and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You know, listen, you know, really bad day. I'm not even sure how I'm going to ride. I can't sit on my bike." He's like, "Listen, a few of us are going for dinner tonight at the Sheraton in Langkawi. Do you want to come?" And I'm like, you know, the third thing I'm going to say in this process, and I just did the biggest show in the world. I was just a guest on Trust, Dave Horsager's show. I said the same thing. The third thing is that it's the trusting and allowing. So when we're intentional, these doors start opening, and this is where people, Sylvie, begin to freak out. right? They literally begin to freak out. It's like saying, yes, I want to win this race. And then suddenly someone who's very accomplished is offering to give you advice, or you come across this magazine article and it's a new way of eating or a new way of doing something, or Sylvia is your coach and she suggests something new. Our pattern is to go back to what is comfortable. But what is comfortable only will ever take us to a certain level. And at some point we have to get uncomfortable. So I go to the Sheraton that night. I don't know anyone. And in fact, I don't even really recognize the person who invited me, but I go and there are all these people sitting in the main lobby in this big circle just around these, you know, in these chairs. And there were 2 chairs open and I go and I sit in one and the guy says, oh, that's my friend. He'll be here in a minute. And I'm like, cool. And so the guy comes and he sits down and I said, hi, I'm Susan. And he goes, hi, I'm Dave. He goes, are you racing? I said, yeah. He goes, oh, you know, are you, you know, you're pro, you're nervous, you're racing against Natasha Badman. And I'm like, no. And he goes, what's your goal? I go, top 10. And I said, there's just one little issue. He said, what's that? And I said, well, I fractured my pelvis. He said, well, I'm an ER doctor from Denver and I freeze your pelvis for you. I travel with lidocaine. And if lidocaine works and we can get you Marcaine, you'll be able to go for 5 hours. And so the 4th thing I want to say to everyone is when that person appears, when that opportunity appears, you've got to say yes. And of course, there's this strange man who's going to stick a huge needle in my nether regions. And I'm like, okay, yes, let's do that. So as luck would have it, this is the craziest story. Going into the trust, right? So the next step is to ask. So I asked very clearly, I'm like, yes, let's do this. Let's freeze my pelvis. And it was so serendipitous. There was this girl that I had known from triathlon in Ontario that happened to be in Malaysia. Like, it was just weird. Like in Malaysia, of all places, you know?
Vacationing?
And she was racing. And I had no idea she was going. And I said, honey, I know we don't know each other really well, but this man is going to stick a big needle in my woohoo. And he's asked that I have another woman who witnesses just so it's not weird. She's like, right. Okay. So she comes, he freezes me. And so I go out on this bike ride to test this frozen pelvis. And I'm like, this is the best. When you've had a fractured pelvis for a couple of weeks and then suddenly this is going on, it's great. And I'm riding and I go down this hill and it's, I look down at, and I'm going close to 60 kilometers an hour. And I'm like loving every minute. I'm like, yes. And this monkey goes to run right in front of my bike. And I start like screaming. I'm like, ee! Like this. It was just this like gut thing, and the thing takes off because apparently I speak monkey. Who knew, right? Which has nothing to do with mindset. But the reason I bring that part of the story up is because the moment you walk through the door, you're going to be tested. Yeah. And so different tests came. So we're in a Muslim country. We have to find a female doctor who's going to give me Marcaine and inject my pelvis. So we had to do that. And then we had to see if it worked. And then we had to get her to actually give Marcaine to the American doctor so he could inject me the morning of the Ironman, which is like 4 a.m, right? Mm-hmm. Come and do that. And then he injects me and I go back to my bike, Sylvie, and both my tires are flat.
Oh, fuck.
So yeah, I know.
Oh,
I'm not
gosh.
even, I was sponsored by, I'm not even going to say their name, but a big, huge tire company in the cycling world. And I had tubes with me, right? And I had 3 tubes because I'm like going to over plan for stuff. And this becomes very important in a minute. So I look over and we're getting close to race time. I have these 2 flat tires. I'm like, wow. So I look over and it's Natasha Badman's husband who's like standing within like 3 meters of me. I'm like, hi, I'm competing against your wife. Could you give me a hand? Because I had to do this fast, right? So we changed out the tires. He's so nice. Because I know in his mind, he's thinking, you're not going to beat Natasha. Because Natasha was the number 1 in the world. No one was going to beat her. And so I'm like, okay, good. I have 1 spare. Tire's good. I go get in the water for the swim, and I'm laying on my back. And there's in Langkawi Harbor, there's this huge, beautiful bronze eagle statue. And I'm laying on my back. I look beside me. My hand touches someone else. It's Natasha Badman. And I look up, and this eagle goes across the sky. Woo! So we start the race, and I swim my guts out. I have my fastest 4K swim I've ever had, because I'm thinking I'm going to get eaten by sharks, right? So I'm like, swimming so fast. And I come out of the water. Good news is, tubes are, still looking pretty good. Yeah. And I start biking, and the heat starts rising. So it's going like up and up and up. So it's like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It goes up past 120. The aid stations run out of water. I have never been thirsty like that in my life. I'm going through the jungle, and there's a person at the side of the road, and I was riding 650s. There's a person at the side of the road.
650s?
Yeah, back in the day. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's old school, right? Like this is, I used to love to ride a 650. So those persons at the side of the road, they flatted out. They're like, I'm out of tubes. I said, what are you riding? And he goes, 650s. And I gave him my last tube. If anyone knows me well, that's pretty much sums up me. Mm-hmm. We have about 30K left to go in this 180K ride. It's hot. I'm dying of thirst. The freezing is coming out of my pelvis, and I'm cycling because I've got this big swelling between my legs, and I'm like boom, 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 cycling. Mm-hmm. And the lead pack of girls, by some grace of God, is not that far ahead of me. I'm like, dang. So we go into this, it's 10K down, 10K up, and at the end, there's an alligator farm. So in my mind, I was like, it's the alligator pit. You've got to go down. You got to go up. As I'm going down, both my frigging tires flat.
What?
Yes.
Did you bike on rims?
I did. With a fractured pelvis with no
Oh my God. You're like, I don't care about this bike after. I'm like, I just getting this done.
And it's so funny because in the speaking world, I get guys coming up going, you're the fractured pelvis girl. Like, that's what they call me. I'm like, okay, if that's what I'm known for, then I'm hardcore. I'm a badass. I don't care. So I'm biking on the rims and like biking, and the girls are getting further away. And so I eventually get through transition. I'm in a world of hurt. And the thing I'll also say is, when we've set our intention, we're determined, we're walking through the doors, we're saying yes, all of those things, when it comes down to mindset, I promise you, God will always put something in your path as a symbol to say, keep your ass going. So I'm feeling sorry for myself. I'm like walking at every aid station. I want to walk the whole damn marathon. Not getting the medal was not an option, because having MS, I knew it'd be my last my last Ironman, but I also had a sense that finishing it was really going to put me in a bad flare-up situation. And it did take me 3 years to recover from that. But I'm feeling sorry for myself. And along comes this guy I know who has no legs. And he's running on prosthetics. And he's done the whole damn Ironman with no legs. And I'm feeling sorry for myself because I've got a hematoma in my vajayjay the size of a grapefruit, right? And so, and his name's Paul. And Paul's like, come on, Susan. And I'm like, I'm coming, Paul. And so I kept on going. And then the race director comes along. He's like, listen, the press is waiting for you to finish. They've heard you have this fractured pelvis. This has become like a big story here. And I said, what place am I in? He said, you're in 8th position. Being half Chinese, I was like, it doesn't get better than this. Number 8 is really number. So I finished 8th in the pro division of the Ironman, and had a lot of cocktails that night. I danced with Lothar Leader. I was probably pretty drunk. It didn't take much after that. This is also the last time I ever went to McDonald's, because I'm a vegetarian.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, I couldn't wear any shoes. My feet are bleeding and blistering. And my friend Susan, who's another pro racer from Australia, she's like, oh, I really want a Big Mac. And I'm like, yeah, me too. And so we go in this Muslim country in our triathlon kits, which like are next to nothing. Like you might as well be naked. It's just whatever. And in our bare feet going into McDonald's to get Big Macs and fries and shakes.
Oh, that must have been the ultimate reward right there, alongside with like, I'm in 8th place. I don't care. I'm going to like haul my ass across the finish line. I'd be right there with you. I'm telling you, like, there's been my mantra when I go into races that I always finish. I don't care if I have to crawl across the finish line. I don't care what kind of story I'm telling myself, or I don't tell myself, but I am always going to finish. And I have always finished. And I'm pretty proud of that because, you know, there's a lot of people who just quit, like on, you know, the littlest thing will put them out of the game. And I find that once you put yourself out of the game once, it just streamlines in, it just follows the next event and the next event. And you're like, and then you've got this series of unfinished events that I know a couple people like that. That's why I say, you know, like, I mean, you have to go kick yourself in the ass and finish it to break the cycle. I love
throw this in, you know, how we hear how you do one thing is how you do everything.
I have that written down.
one of the things that I'll say is that if you quit at one thing, you'll quit at everything. And I know some of you are listening going, well, Susan, sometimes it's healthy to quit. Ask yourself, is it, or is that a story you're telling yourself? It's not easy to be married. It's not easy to be a parent. It's not easy to, you know, to build a massive business. It's not easy to stay in a business relationship when, you know, you're having conflict, but at the end of the day, you've got to answer to investors or whatever the case is. Like, of course not. So, you know, it's how you want to be defined, because at the end of the day, our regrets aren't going to be the things we really stuck with. They're going to be the things we quit.
Definitely. Now, taking that mindset, now, what kind of, I mean, that's, I'm glad I got the whole story, because that's a really good story.
Thank you.
It's so funny. It's about the same time that I tried triathlon. But so moving that kind of mindset into your business, how have you applied that? Like, I know I tell myself, you know, it can never be as bad as that, like, or that, as long as I just keep moving forward and plugging away. So what kind of advice can you say, or what have you implemented that you learned from those experiences?
That's a great question. I mean, that, you know, it's suddenly as though, you know, something is going to be challenging, you give yourself permission to endure pain. Right? So in business, in any business, the first thing, like quitting's not an option. Okay. So once I know that quitting's not an option, I'm getting some kind of medal at the end, because it's all about the hardware. Everyone gets the t-shirt, not everyone gets the medal, right? So once I know that, then I'm going to follow the same steps. You know, what is my intention? What is my outcome? I'm going to trust, I'm going to ask, I'm going to walk through those doors. And is it easy? Gosh, no, it is not easy at all. I mean, even, you know, at the end of the day, sometimes you're going to have more opportunities to quit than you will to stay in the game. But, you know, there's not one person I know. I know someone, he's had several AI exits in Silicon Valley totaling $8.3 billion. Wow. And every one of those companies, at some point, there's been a conflict. At some point, there's been a challenge, right? But, you know, everyone wants that, you know, oh, I want that 8.3 billion, or even look at Elon Musk. You know, Elon Musk several years ago, I know you know this story, but just in case not everyone does, he went to Tim Cook. He tried to get a meeting with Tim Cook at Apple to try and sell Tesla to Apple. And Tim wouldn't even take the meeting. And now Elon Musk is the wealthiest man in the world. And so, you know, we look at that and go, there was Elon going, I think I'm ready to quit. I think I'm ready to throw in the towel. And that's the one of the points I made, is that your higher power will always have a different outcome, right? So that, you know, it was just not meant to be. And the same thing, Yahoo wanted to buy Facebook, and they offered them $1 billion. And Mark Zuckerberg said no, because he believed so strongly. He was like, I'm not going to quit. I know where we're going. It's one of the wealthiest companies in the world today, and no one uses Yahoo anymore, like hardly anyone, right? And everyone in Silicon Valley thought this was hilarious. They thought Mark was stupid for saying no. They thought Yahoo was stupid for offering $1 billion. And how much money is Facebook worth now? Right?
Oh, I know. I don't even want to contemplate. But certainly with one door closes, another opens. And so I have one thing. So even if you're moving forward, like I always look at sport as there's always an end goal. And when we're talking about business, I think it's really important to give ourselves end goals. And for those who are having a hard time setting those end goals and then the little intentions along the way. So it's like little training periods, periodizing of your business to the ultimate launch pad. Like, oh my gosh, I have to look at my stuff like that. And I probably, so what, so I'm just like, man, this is how I need to be thinking. But what kind of advice would you give somebody who's kind of like procrastinating on the sidelines and, would really love to go for that big business deal or start a business, or because you have started a lot of things and you've done extremely well with them. Like I'm a product of those, and they're, but for somebody who's sitting there looking, because like now the online platform is the name of the game. Like if you're going to launch a business, it's going to be online. So what kind of advice would you give somebody for that?
Well, it's such a great question because it ties so beautifully into sport. They're intertwined. In athletics, we think about the next race. And what entrepreneurs do who fail, they only think about the next deal, or they think about the next company they're going to start. And athletes, if they only think about the next race, and they don't think about the longevity of their career, they don't have a long career. And let me give an example. So Tom Brady in football, whether people like him or not, here he is in his 40s, defying the odds. His body has next to no inflammation whatsoever, right? So here he is, because he's thought of his career as a long game, not just I need to get to the Super Bowl, right? The same thing is true when I was a trainer in Canada, I'm working with Kirk Muller, and Kirk had been released from the Florida Panthers. Here he was, Stanley Cup champion. And he came to me and said, can you get me more time in the NHL? And I said, you have to eat like I tell you how to eat. You have to sleep when I tell you to sleep. You have to do what I tell you. We're going to train you differently because you're in your 30s. And I remember on Hockey Night in Canada, they were like, Muller's trying to make a comeback. He's too old. He has this trainer who's making him drink protein shakes. Like that was me, right? And but we had to look at Kirk's career as the long game. So the moment we started to focus on the long game, he got 4 more years. He won the OT. They won in overtime against Edmonton in OT. He got the game-winning goal. And Don Cherry's like, Muller's back. I heard his trainer makes him do yoga. Yeah, I did freaking make him do yoga. He was in his 30s, you do what you need to do. And so now we're seeing athletes in all sports who are racing into their 40s. And soon it's going to be the really defying the odds. Dara Torres came back to the Olympics and won several medals in her 40s. And so, and Michael Phelps, and so many different athletes. So we look at that and we go, the same thing is true for business. What is your long game? Now, there are only so many exits you can have in business, but there are only so many exits you can have in athletics. So let's compare them, shall we?
Yeah.
So Michael Phelps said, I'm going to retire on top, right? And so in the business world, what that means is when I'm done, I'm selling my company, or my kid is inheriting my company, or my employees are inheriting my company through an ESOP, but we're going to leave on top, and we'll know when we get to that moment, because that's the moment we're going to sell it. Right now, the real estate market where I live is so hot. If I sell my house, it's going to be the peak of the market. And I can say, you know what, this is a great time to get out because we're getting out on top. So that's one exit in business. Second kind of exit in business is involuntary. Same thing is true in sport. Lance Armstrong. Okay. So he got busted for doping. I'm sorry, I'll say this. They were all doping. They were all.
I'm totally
doping.
with you.
Yep.
Like
Ben Johnson. I know, I knew Ben. Ben and I used to train on the same track, the same time. Ben got busted for doping, but they were all doping. So, you know, so you can have this involuntary exit. The same thing is true with business, is whether it's a lawsuit or whatever, it takes you out of the game. Sometimes people come back from that, and people have. It's the same thing in sport. The next thing is just someone quits. They have a really bad race, or, you know, they're training, and it doesn't go the way they want. And they're like, I just quit. And the same thing is true in business. Oh, this is harder than I thought it'd be, so I'm just going to quit. Well, guess what? History doesn't remember. Look at all the people I mentioned: Ben Johnson, Lance Armstrong, Michael Phelps, Dara Torres. People remember their names. They don't remember the names of the quitters. So it's like anything in sport. If I'm going to be a cyclist and I was going to train under Sylvie, I would say, I'm going to do this for 5 years. It's going to be a long game. Right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You mentioned network marketing, direct sales space. Anyone listening, they should really connect with you about that. When I initially committed to it, why? I have a lot of business skills. So why would I do something like that? Because it is actually the only business model out there where a lot of people have to succeed in order for you to succeed. I'm not talking about like 10 or 20. I'm talking about hundreds, not thousands, right? So our team has produced over $1.6 billion in sales, but that's a lot of people helping a lot of people. Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is because when I committed to it, I had to learn it as though I was becoming a professional. So I gave it 7 years. Right? I said, I will use the products for 7 years. I'm going to learn this for 7 years. I'm going to tune into videos, podcasts, everything to become a professional. If I don't get, you know, if I'm not successful after 7 years, then shame on me, not on anything else. And that's what I would say, Sylvie. It goes back to what I said about the Ironman. It's the same thing. You know, what is your commitment? What is your intention? Are you going to walk through the doors, even though they scare you? Are you going to ask for what you want? Are you going to be bold even in the face of challenge? When a monkey runs across your path, or you can't, you know, you need to find a female doctor in a male dominated medical industry in a country, and you know, all these things that I had to say yes to, and there were so many times I could have quit. This same thing in business.
Oh yeah, I know. That's, you know, those are, I can't even say, like, it is so true. Like when you start comparing everything, and I was just thinking about what I was saying before, you know, working on your business. But this has been a great, like, I don't know if you have any, we're at the top of the hour, but I don't know if you have any closing advice for anybody who's, I don't know, like there's so many people who just bought bikes last year, let's say, for instance.
I got a new one on Mother's Day, so now I have 2 kickbacks.
Yes. You have 2 bikes? Okay, well, now you have to get
I have a tri bike and I have a road bike.
Oh, very nice. I will have to see you on that bike, and if I ever get back to Phoenix, I will bring my bike, or I'll rent a bike and we'll go riding. But so a ton of people are now on bikes, and they say that this is going to be the most interesting turn of events for cycling over the next 3 years of this business, because this is the year, like, people are either they loved it, they were inspired by it, they trained her through the winter, and they're going to continue on this year, or they're going to sell their nice expensive bike and we're going to get great deals. So yeah, and then, or we're just going to have so many people, say women, on bikes, and they're looking for clubs and they're looking for ways of getting better. Now, and then if we ever get back to events, which I think they have events for triathlon. I don't know how that works, but something's going on. but people are still going to participate them. So what would you say to somebody who's, you know, say they bought that bike and they're like, well, I don't know, it's kind of like, that was nice at the time, but you know, I'm not quite into it this year. But we just like, you know, just to give them that that air of confidence, just to keep going. I know what I would say. I'd be like, get on the damn bike. No, I'm just kidding. Join my club. But what would you say?
Sure. I think the answer that's on my heart to say is that any achievement happens with all the things that no one sees us do. And so you know, getting up at 4 a.m. when you have to homeschool your kids and your bike is on the trainer and it's really cold outside and you're like, I just want to stay in bed, or whatever the case is, but you get on the bike anyway. And, you know, a lot of people have asked me, you know, how did you transcend MS? Well, there were some days, you know, keep in mind, I used to do like an 8 to 10 hour training day on a Sunday when I was training for Ironman. There were some days that walking 5 minutes was the most I could do, and no one saw me do that. Yeah. But, you know, as a result, here I am today. So what are you going to do when no one's watching? And that would be one thing I'd say. And the second thing I would say is, look at all the things you've given up on in your life, and where would you be with those things right now if you hadn't quit? And I don't mean getting out of an abusive relationship or anything like that, but I mean, like, you know, all the workouts that you committed to, or all of the things, the businesses you started, or whatever it is, where would you be if you hadn't quit? And don't let this be another symptom of an underlying problem where you feel that you don't deserve to be successful, or you don't deserve to get ahead, because you do. And so that's what I would say, Sylvie.
Oh my gosh. I absolutely love that, because I encourage my ladies, you know, to just push back past those feelings of uncertainty, of low self-confidence, that, you know, they're not going to be good enough for the group, or whatever kind of negative story that they put in their heads. I said, you know, just leave that at home and come out and experience, and, you know, just allow yourself to embrace something that you are really interested in. And don't, you know, because a lot of, and I find it mostly in women, they'll shut the door on a lot of things. They'll have all the excuses like, oh, I had an accident, it's never going to be the same. I don't have the confidence riding within car, you know, around vehicles. I'm like, well, you're always going to feel that way if you never get back on your bike. It's like getting back on the horse, right? And, you know, think about if you went to Malaysia and decided to quit because you couldn't find a doctor. I mean, like, I can see you there, like, we're going to find somebody, and I'm sure somebody in here knows it, the concierge, somebody, the waitress, somebody knows someone. And so, and it's the same in business. You know, it's just pushing past those I guess you can call them pain points that maybe you just don't like, they're painful and you don't like that feeling, but, you know, pain is temporary. Like your pelvis, it doesn't hurt anymore.
No, thank God. No.
See, that's all temporary. So with that, thank you so much, Susan. I absolutely love you and adore you to death. And I feel bad that you're in the United States. You're no longer in Canada, but you know, we'll always be seeing each other online. So again, I want to thank you as our guest for today on Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast. This has been extraordinary. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And I hope you got a little nugget out from this discussion, this episode. And don't forget to subscribe and put those notifications on, and definitely share with your fellow cyclists. And with that, have an amazing day, amazing week, and amazing winter of training. And we'll see each other out on the road. Take care.